This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and GatheringMagic.com, the #1 source for Magic the Gathering news and content. Now it's time for our latest video with Allen Pennington.
Welcome to this week's deck primer, or for those of you who watched the last one, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at Modern Merfolk. And Modern Merfolk is a beatdown deck. We're trying to hit them for 20 as quickly as possible, ideally even an unblockable 20. And the deck is kind of similar to the standard mono blue deck, if you're familiar with that. We're not as heavily based around the devotion mechanic, but we do have like 4 Master Waves, 1 Thassa, and then like a bunch of 2-drops. It's kind of similar. And the main difference here actually is that with Lord of Atlantis and Master of Pearl Trident, we can give our guys Island Walk. And that's very important because there are some decks in Modern that do play islands, but most decks in the format don't play islands. So because of that, we're playing 4 Spreading Seas, which is a very insane card. I mean, I like to say that it's a 2-mana Stone Rain that draws a card and makes all of your guys unblockable. That's probably over-exaggerating a little. It has like a lot of value in the Tron matchup in particular. It's also good against Jund just for like cutting off one of their colors. But the main reason why it's there is that it lets all of our Island Walk guys hit through, and it also contributes to our devotion count for Thassa and Master Waves. One key thing to discuss is the splash. We are splashing white for Path to Exile main and Leyline of Sanctity side. Most of these decks are actually mono blue. They would normally be playing like Vapor Snag over Path to Exile and then just islands where you see all of these other lands. There are some builds that also splash different colors. You could splash red for Lightning Bolt and Izzet Charm main deck, and then in the side deck you could get things like Grim Lavamancer, Combust, Blood Moon, etc., etc. And then the other option would be to splash black, which would give you Thoughtseize. Here I decided to splash white, particularly because it is the easiest splash in terms of our mana base. By splashing an allied color, we get access to the Scars duels. So if we were splashing red, we would not have that. And then by splashing white specifically, we get access to Wanderwine Hub. And these two are going to come into play untapped 99% of the time. And then Hallowed Fountain, of course, you all know that. Obviously, we can just pay 2 life and make that come into play untapped anytime. And one nice thing is that we don't play any fetch lands. That might not sound like anything to be that excited about, but if we play fetch lands, it does make our opponent's Deathrite Shamans better. So white is a very easy splash. We don't have to play fetches and make our opponent's Deathrite Shamans better. It's just, you know, very straightforward. We've got like 10 white sources, 4 white cards. Works out pretty well. I've yet to have actually get punished for this splash yet, so I figure it's a free splash. Why not go for it? I'm also playing one of Cavern of Souls. This also seems kind of free. There aren't many counterspell decks in the format, but pretty much everything in our deck is a Merfolk. So it's essentially just an island that in some scenarios will, you know, make our guy uncounterable. There might be a situation where, say, you have like 2 lands in your opening and they're like Cavern of Souls and Mutavault, and then you're like, oh, I can't cast my Spreading Seas, but I could if it were an island. But again, I've also yet to have gotten punished for playing one of Cavern of Souls, so until I am, I'm going to be sticking with this mana base here. It looks pretty good. We are playing 21 lands with 4 Mutavaults, which might seem a little on the low side, but I kind of consider like Aether Vial to be a land too. It lets us put our creatures into play. So it's really like we're playing more like 25 lands, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. One note about this deck or this build is that it's not really fine-tuned. We do have some weird numbers like 1 Thassa, 2 Reejery, 2 Corahelm Commander. I've only played it in 1 daily. Prior to this, I went 3-1. The deck did do better than I expected, so that was the main reason I decided to give it another go. But yeah, the deck's definitely not set in stone. I haven't tested Thassa before. Some decks play 0, some decks play 2. I decided to start off in the middle with 1. Reejery, I often see as like a 3 of or a 4 of, but I was a little unsure on it, so I figured I'd start with 2. If it was really good, I could move it to 3. If 3 is really good, I could move it to 4, etc. And then some of these decks also only play 3 Cursecatchers, but since we are playing an aggro deck, I do like to sort of maximize our ability to curve out. So being able to like play a Cursecatcher on 1, or being able to play a 2-drop and a Cursecatcher on 3 is something that's important to me. I like to maximize our damage and maximize our mana usage. So I've already gone over most of our card choices here. Just to fill in the gaps, we have our 8 Lords, and then the next most important 2-drop would be Silvergill Adept. Just a 2/1 for 2 mana that draws you a card is pretty insane, and of course it's a Merfolk, so they get pumped by our Lords. Phantasmal Image is good. I think 2 is the correct number, because you don't want... It's not really a card you want to draw multiples of, but just being able to copy a Lord is good. Being able to copy a Master Waves is really good. Sometimes you even copy your opponent's creatures. Maybe they have a Dark Confidant in play and you want to draw some cards yourself, so you'll do that. There are some cool tricks too with Aether Vial and Phantasmal Image. I've had games where I've been tapped out with the Master Waves and they go to kill the Master Waves on their turn, and then I vial in a Phantasmal Image, copy Master Waves, get to keep all my tokens, make more tokens, and blow them out. So I've definitely been happy with Phantasmal Image, but I would definitely not consider playing more. Corahelm Commander is alright. It's probably the weakest of the 2-drops, but a 3/3 flyer for 2 mana is good. Late game, it can also be a pretty big threat once you get it to level 4. A 4/4 Flying Lord is obviously pretty insane, and of course it does cost double blue, so it contributes 2 to our devotion, unlike Silvergill, for example, so that is nice as well. Thassa is kind of just there to be a good card, I guess. I don't know. Again, I'm not really sure what the correct number is. Maybe it's 0, maybe it's 2, I'm not sure. Hopefully I get to cast it and see how good it is. And Master of Waves, to save the best card for last, I would say this card is even better in Modern than it is in Standard, because people are less prepared to deal with it. There are less Supreme Verdicts, there are less removal spells in general that aren't red. Against Jund, say, for example, Jund just doesn't have ways to kill this card. They can't Lightning Bolt it, they can't Terminate it, of course they can't Abrupt Decay it because it's a 4-mana card. If they Liliana, we can just sack one of our tokens. So really their only way to kill this card is Maelstrom Pulse. And sometimes they don't even play it, or they only play 1, so there are just some decks where you just cast Master Waves, put 5 or 6 tokens into play, and they just can't beat you. And of course, also a Merfolk, which is good. We can reveal it to Silvergill, reveal it to Wanderwine Hub, and if we cast Master Waves with Reejery in play, we get to tap or untap something. As far as matchups go, I already mentioned that Jund is a really good matchup because they just don't have very many ways to deal with Master of Waves. Tron is also a good matchup, just because Spreading Seas is an insanely good card against them. The trickier matchups are the combo decks, I would say. I've yet to play against Splinter Twin, but I don't think that deck is really great for us, just because they have a 2-card combo that can kill us on turn 4, and we don't have a lot of ways to interact with it, just our 4 paths. Even the pod matchups, I'm a little unsure about. I've done well against them so far, but I figure maybe I've just gotten lucky. And even Scapeshift, just being a classic control combo hybrid, seems to be a bit difficult. All they have to do is hold us off until they get 7 lands, and then they cast Scapeshift and we can't do anything. So on that note, I'll explain the sideboard and how we hope to solve some of our bad matchups. One thing you'll hear me mention a lot is that when I play Magic, I like to get free wins. Whether we're discussing the deck that I'm playing or the card choices in particular, I like winning games with minimal effort. So that is, for the most part, how the sideboard is constructed. We have a bunch of cards that, in some particular matchup, will win the game if they resolve and stay in play. For example, Grafdigger's Cage, very good against Pod, very good against Malaria Pod in particular, because Cage not only shuts off the Birthing Pod itself and the Chord of Calling, but it also stops their Persist creatures, meaning that they can't gain infinite life or deal us infinite damage. And the Pod decks do play some amount of artifact removal generally, in the form of Qasali Pride Mage or Harmonic Sliver, but they don't have a lot of it because their mentality is, oh, I'll be able to search it up when I need it. But of course, Cage stops them from searching it, so they have to naturally draw into their answer for it. So that would be why Cage is there. Leyline of Sanctity is actually a new addition. It's mainly in there to improve the Scapeshift matchup, since I don't think that's like a great matchup for us. Obviously, if it's in play, they don't have a win condition. They do have answers. They can balance it with Cryptic Command, and if we don't open with it, they can counter it if we just cast it for 4 mana. But Leyline gives us a free win against Scapeshift, potentially, and it also gives us a free win against Burn. Burn actually is a real deck in this format, and it's a bit popular on Magic Online in particular due to the fact that it is very inexpensive. So, free win in potentially 2 different matchups that we're likely to play against. Then we got Spell Pierce, which is the only card that's not in our sideboard to give us a free win. It's just sort of a catch-all if there's some particular matchup where we want to counterspell. Spell Pierce also comes in against something like Scapeshift, for example, just to counter their ramp spells or counter their counters even. And it's also there for various blue-white, red-oriented control decks, just things like that. We can counter a random removal spell or a Sphinx's Revelation or something like that. It'd just feel weird to me to be playing a blue deck without any counter spells in my 75, so that's why it's there. And then Spellskite is here for Splinter Twin. Pretty obvious. Spellskite's kind of been the standard sideboard against Splinter Twin for a while, so they might be prepared for it in some way, but they do have to answer it, and if they don't, they can't really do anything. So that is why Spellskite's there. And then Threads is here for a couple of matchups. I really like it against Jund because stealing a Termagoyf or a Dark Confidant can be a really big blowout. The downside, of course, is that they can't Abrupt Decay to just kill our Threads and take their guy back, but ideally we try to make them use Abrupt Decay on one of our Threads first and then play the Threads later in the game after they've exhausted their removal spells. And Threads is also quite good in the mirror match, which this deck is starting to pick up a little, both on Magic Online and in real life. Merfolk is a deck that people are aware of, and especially if you're going to a Grand Prix, it could be something that you'd play against in one of your 15 rounds. So I do like having something to bring in for the mirror that kind of swings things in our favor. Then last but not least, this might even be the overall best card in our sideboard, is Tidebinder Mage. It's good in Modern for pretty much the same reasons it's good in Standard. Tapping down a Termagoyf or a Kitchen Finks or a Voice of Resurgence, or even just one basic thing that I like doing is just if we're on the play and we go land go and then they go land Deathrite Shaman, just going turn 2 Tidebinder Mage to tap down their Deathrite Shaman can basically set them back a turn, as you might imagine. Also good for tapping down Birds of Paradise for the same way. So if we were allowed to sideboard 16 cards, hypothetically, the 16th card would probably be the 3rd Tidebinder Mage. It's good against Jund, it's good against Pod, it's even good against the red deck wins that I discussed before. There are just a lot of decks that are playing some sort of red or green creatures, and I even think in the right meta you could possibly main deck 1 or 2 copies, because Jund is one of the most popular decks, Pod is one of the most popular decks. If you're expecting a lot of Jund and Pod in your field, I do think you could potentially justify maining this card. It is a Merfolk as well, which is obviously very important. So the card is definitely good at getting value in a lot of different matchups. Probably the only thing that I'm not siding for that you might want to change or be worried about is we really have nothing here for Affinity. Affinity's strategy is a little similar to ours. They're a bit more combo-based, but they're also trying to deal 20 as quickly as possible, often unblockable. Say an Ornithopter equipped with a Cranial Plating or something along those lines. If you want, I did have Hurkyl's Recalls in here before. You could sideboard those. You could also sideboard something like Stony Silence, since we are playing white. And there are a few options as well. There are like some artifact counter spells like Annul. It's 1 mana, counters an artifact or enchantment. So we got options like that. I don't think the affinity matchup is very bad, so I don't feel bad about not having anything in our side, especially since we're remaining the 4 Path to Exiles. I feel like it makes our affinity matchup a little better than most Merfolk decks, especially since they're not even playing any basic lands, so Path to Exile is just a hard removal spell with no downsides. But if you're testing against affinity and you find yourself losing a bit more than you're comfortable with, then I would definitely recommend putting something in the sideboard for affinity. Maybe even taking out the Leyline of Sanctities if you're not expecting a lot of Scape Shift or red deck wins. So that about covers it. None of the matchups really feel unwinnable, which is good. It's a very easy deck to play. Like, you're just attacking with a bunch of unblockable creatures, so hopefully we will do well.